My hands trembled against the polished brass railing as I descended the staircase of my childhood home. The funeral was over, the minister's final blessing spoken, and now I was alone with my grief and the weight of every memory I had ever made in this house. Mom's favorite blue vase still rested on the mantel, an anchor to a life I had recently lost, and a cruel reminder that everything else I held dear might slip away at any moment. I had barely caught my breath after the service, had barely allowed myself a moment to weep at her graveside, when I received the text. It was from Derek. Derek, who had held my hand with such tenderness when I whispered my goodbyes to Mother. Derek, who had promised to meet me afterward, to hold me and tell me everything would be okay. Derek, my husband of 7 years. The message blinked on my phone screen. I had no choice. Be home. My heart plummeted. There was an urgency in his words I didn't understand. No, I love you. No gentle coaxing. Just the raw insistence of a command less than an hour after I had buried my mother. Against my better judgment, I pressed my thumb against the home button and slid the phone into my coat pocket. The air felt thin, like I was breathing through a straw. I kept my answer to myself and climbed into the car Derek had bought me for my last birthday, the one he refused to let me pay for, despite my protests. The engine's growl sounded too loud in the silent neighborhood, the tires humming against the asphalt like a low pulse. With each block I covered, my anxiety grew, twisting my insides into knots. When I turned onto our street, the porch lights were off. Our welcoming home, a place I had always associated with warmth, looked cold and empty in the pale afternoon light. I parked in the driveway and pulled my coat tighter around me. The door was unlocked. I should have known. Inside, the air smelled of unfamiliar perfume, something sharp and floral that made me pause a moment too long in the entryway. The hallway was perfectly still, but every photograph hanging on the walls, the snapshots of holidays, birthdays, our wedding day, seemed to watch me, silent witnesses to the betrayal I felt rising in my chest. I walked toward the living room, footsteps soft against the Persian rug. My breath caught when I saw the love seat. It was the one I had chosen, the leather, deep chestnut brown, with stitching so fine it looked like a painter's brushstroke. In that love seat, a seat I had shared with Derek while binge-watching our favorite shows, sat a woman. She was reading a magazine, legs crossed, one arm draped across the back. The low light caught her hair, honey blonde streaks dancing among darker waves. Her lips curved into a small, satisfied smile as she turned a page. She looked up at me, and I froze. My pulse thundered in my ears. Who? Celia, she said, her voice calm, practiced. She closed the magazine with deliberate slowness. Nice to finally meet you. My hands flew to my mouth. The world spun. For a heartbeat I stood there, rooted to the floor. Then I took a step forward. Why? My voice cracked. Why are you here? Celia's smile softened, but her eyes were steady. I needed a place to stay. It's just temporary. There was something rehearsed in her tone, like she had anticipated my question and practiced that answer 100 times. Temporary? I managed, my voice hollow. She nodded, as if confirming a minor detail. He, Derek, said it was okay. My chest tightened. The words slammed into me like a physical blow. My vision blurred. Derek had said it was okay. I felt dizzy. My knees threatened to collapse. I reached for the edge of a coffee table, the one with the chipped corner Derek had meant to repair last month. All those small, familiar details now felt foreign, contaminated. Padashan Noah. How could he do this to me? I whispered to the empty room, to the woman who lounged on my furniture like she owned it, to the memory of my mother waiting in the next room in her coffin. Celia stood, smoothing the skirt of her dress. Look, I know it's hard, she said, stepping toward me, but I'm not staying long, I promise. My heart pounded in my throat. Promise? She hesitated, then gave me a tight nod. Just until I get back on my feet. Back on my feet. As if my feet were not the ones that had carried me through hell the past few days. Through the church doors, through the last tearful glance at my mother's flag-draped casket. She sighed, as though I were failing to understand something obvious. I didn't ask to be put in this position, she added, but it is what it is. Her arrogance stung like a slap. I took another step forward. Where is he? Celia glanced over her shoulder toward the hallway. He's outside. He's handling some things. I realized then that this wasn't chance. This was deliberate. A calculated invasion while I was at my lowest. Rage ignited in my veins. My cheeks burned, my fists clenched. I thought of my mother's funeral, how I had wept on her coffin, how I had clung to my father's arm as he spoke of loss and legacy. And now this woman had moved into the home my husband and I shared. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. I want him here, I said. Celia's lips curved faintly. Okay, she turned and walked toward the front door. He'll be here soon. I followed her into the foyer, where sunlight slanted through the side lights next to the door. My reflection shimmered in the glass, dark circles under my eyes, cheeks still stained with tears, throat raw from sobbing. Celia paused beside the door. She clicked her tongue softly. You know, I feel sorry for you. Truly, but, like I said, it is what it is. She opened the door, stepped onto the porch, and closed it behind her. The lock clicked into place. I rushed forward, rattling it. You! I pounded with my fists. Let me out! Inside, the house felt like a cage. I pressed my face against the door's window. Through the muted sunlight, I made out Derek pacing by the car, his head bowed. In his hand was my mother's locket, something I had entrusted him with at the burial. My grip on the door tightened until my knuckles whitened. Derek, I called, my voice raw. But he didn't look up. He didn't look up at all. I stepped back, the reality crushing me. The house felt so small now, the walls closing in. Memories of laughter and holidays and quiet Sunday mornings with my mother faded, replaced by the harsh scent of betrayal. The front door remained locked. In my mind, a single thought repeated. He left me. At my mother's funeral, he left me. And now he had the nerve to hold my mother's locket like a bargaining chip. I sank to the floor, sliding down until the wood paneling scraped raw against my back. Each breath felt like shards of glass in my lungs. I thought of the vows I had taken, the promises we had whispered in that church 7 years ago. I thought of the woman who had given me life, whose funeral I had attended just hours before. The weight of loss crushed me. And then a knock sounded on the door. Sharp, deliberate. My head snapped up. 3 knocks again. Derek. My pulse thundered. I scrambled to my feet, smearing dust across my jeans. I wiped my palms on my dress, and then I squared my shoulders. I would not beg. Through the glass I saw his silhouette, tall and rigid. He raised the locket in his hand. My heart seized. Before I could decide whether to curse or weep, he knocked one final time. I closed my eyes, steeling myself. When I opened them, I climbed onto the porch, keyed the lock, and turned the handle. The door swung open. But what I saw on the other side stole my breath. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Derek stood on the other side of the door with an expression I couldn't decipher. Part guilt, part arrogance, part something colder I didn't recognize. The locket dangled between his fingers, glinting in the late afternoon sun like a relic from a life I no longer had access to. Behind him, the woman, Celia, stood leaning against my porch railing, her arms crossed, eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses. She didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't even blink. Give it to me, I said, voice low, trembling. Derek looked down at the locket. He hesitated, as though even that gesture, the smallest act of decency, would cost him more than he was willing to give. Then, wordlessly, he placed it in my outstretched hand. It was warm from his skin, my mother's locket. Inside was a tiny photograph of her as a child, smiling beside her father's rusted truck. I closed my fingers around it, heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. Explain, I whispered, unable to trust myself to say more. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. It's not what it looks like. The cliché hit me like an insult. Oh, really? I said, my voice sharpening. Because it looks like you moved another woman into my home while I was burying my mother. He looked away. Do you hear yourself? I asked. Do you even understand what today is? I didn't plan it this way, he said quietly. Then what way did you plan it? I stepped forward. Did you think I'd be so broken I wouldn't notice? Or did you hope I'd stay at my parents' house longer so you could play house with your new roommate? Celia's chuckle cut through the air like a blade. You really want to have this conversation on the porch, she asked? Because the neighbors are definitely watching. I turned to glare at her. Let them watch. Derek placed himself between us, hands raised. Look, this isn't helping anyone. You know what would help? I asked. The truth, all of it, right now. He rubbed his jaw. It started a few months ago, just texting, then lunch, then… You cheated, I said flatly. He didn't deny it. I felt the words hit me, each one a pebble dropped into the ocean of my grief, creating ripples that threatened to drown me. And you brought her here, I choked, to our home? She had nowhere to go, Derek said. So you offered her night bed? It's not like that, he snapped. My breath hitched. I turned, walking into the house, needing distance, or I'd do something I couldn't take back. He followed me. I stopped in the foyer. Then explain, I said, spinning to face him. He hesitated. You've been distant. I stared at him, stunned. You think grief makes me less of a wife? No, he said too quickly. Then what? That I wasn't smiling enough while I watched my mother die? He looked down. I needed support, Derek. I needed my husband. Instead, I got a stranger in my house. The silence stretched. He stepped toward me. I made a mistake. That's not a mistake, I said. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is backing into a mailbox. What you did was a choice. Over and over again. I took a deep breath. And now you're going to unchoose it. You're going to fix this. He frowned. What are you saying? I pointed to the hallway. She leaves. Tonight. Or I do. He looked conflicted, as if I'd just asked him to choose between saving a life and walking away. Say something, I demanded. I can't throw her out, he said finally. Not like this. My heart plummeted again, lower this time. You won't, not can't. Asterisk. He swallowed. She doesn't have anyone else. She has you. Asterisk. He closed his eyes. I turned, walking away. The floor creaked beneath my feet. Every step away from him felt like shedding skin. In the kitchen, I placed the locket on the counter, staring at it like it could guide me. The door creaked. Derek followed. What are you going to do? He asked. I don't know, I whispered. And that was the truth. I didn't know who I was without my mother. I didn't know who I was with a husband who betrayed me. I didn't know where home was anymore. He leaned against the doorframe. You know I still love you. I looked at him. At the man I once believed would protect me from everything. You love convenience, you love not being alone, but you don't love ninepenners me. Not really. He didn't argue. I walked past him, up the stairs to our bedroom, my bedroom. When I opened the door, a pair of heels lay on the carpet beside the bed. My bed. I bent, picked them up, and threw them out into the hallway. Derek flinched. Your girlfriend can collect her trash, I said. He stepped forward. Just calm down. Don't tell me to calm down, I said, voice rising. This isn't trust drama, this is betrayal. He backed off. I went to the closet, pulled out my suitcase. I started packing, slowly, deliberately. He watched me. You don't have to do this. I chew. Asterisk. He stepped closer. Please, just think. I zipped the suitcase shut. I already did. I just buried my mother, Derek. And instead of holding me, you replaced me. I shoved the suitcase past him, down the hallway, down the stairs. At the bottom, Celia stood waiting. You don't have to go, she said, sweet as poison. I didn't reply. I opened the door. The afternoon had faded into gold, the sky streaked with orange. Where will you go? Derek asked from behind. I turned. Somewhere you're not. Then I stepped into the light. My best friend Lauren opened her apartment door in a hoodie and sweatpants, mouth full of chocolate. What happened to the funeral dinner? I collapsed into her arms. Lauren was the kind of friend who didn't ask questions until your hands stopped shaking. She made tea, set a blanket on the couch, and handed me tissues like she was born to comfort hurricanes. When I told her everything, she didn't interrupt. She let me say the awful words, out loud. "He moved her in," I said, "into my house while I was gone." Lauren's jaw dropped. "What kind of sociopath?" "I think she planned it," I whispered. "Celia, she said she had nowhere to go, but I don't believe her." Lauren frowned. "You think she manipulated him?" I stared at the mug in my hands. "I think she picked the moment I was weakest to strike, and Derek, he let her." Lauren nodded slowly. "Do you want to fight?" I looked up. "Fight?" She leaned forward, eyes bright. "Fight for what's yours. Legally, emotionally, spiritually, whatever. Because if you do, I'm in." I hesitated. The thought of returning to that house, facing them, made my stomach twist. But something hardened in me. "I don't want him back," I said. "But I want justice." Lauren smiled. "You think they're smart?" I said. "But they did this in Chermingheim's house, under Smyman Chermingheim name. And Derek forgot one very important thing." "What?" Lauren asked. I reached for my bag, pulled out a manila folder. "I own the mortgage." Lauren blinked. "You what? Asterisk?" I nodded. "It was part of the refinancing deal last year. Derek's credit was bad. We put the deed in my name." Her mouth fell open. I leaned back, heart pounding. "I don't need revenge. I just need a good lawyer." Lauren laughed, full and free. "Girl, you don't need a lawyer. You are the lawyer." "Not anymore. I left that life behind." "Maybe," she said, "but now it's knocking on your front door." I sipped my tea. "Then let's answer it." And that night, for the first time since the funeral, I slept. But when I woke up the next morning, my phone had 20 missed calls. All from Derek. And one voicemail from an unknown number. I pressed play. "Hey, this is Detective Avery with the Metro PD. We need you to come down to the station about a break-in at your property last night. Please call us back." I sat up, heart pounding. A break-in. My house. And Derek was already calling. I stared at the phone screen. The game had just changed. I didn't move. The phone screen glowed on the nightstand like it was watching me, waiting to see what I would do next. I stared at it, the detective's voice echoing in my mind, twisting around my thoughts like vines tightening around a pillar. Break in. My house. The house Derek and I once shared. The house I now legally owned. My heart raced. Was it him? Celia? Someone else entirely? Or was this just another manipulation tactic? An emotional flare tossed into the dark to make me run back and play the part of the concerned, dependent wife. Lauren emerged from the kitchen, holding 2 mugs. She stopped when she saw my face. "What is it?" I held up the phone. There was a break-in. Her eyebrows furrowed. "Where?" "My house. Detective left a voicemail." I pressed play again, letting her hear it for herself. She sat beside me, quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You think it's real?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But if it is, I need to go." Lauren nodded slowly. "You're not going alone?" By 9 a.m., we were in her car, gliding through morning traffic. I stared out the window, barely registering the world flying by. In my lap, I clutched the folder with the mortgage documents, proof that the house was mine, that I wasn't just a guest in my own life. At the station, Detective Avery met us in the lobby. He was young, maybe 35, with a sharp jaw and dark eyes that missed nothing. "Ms. DeWitt?" he asked. I stood. "Yes, this is my friend Lauren." He nodded politely and gestured for us to follow. We walked into a small interview room. On the table was a printed photo. My front door, wide open, the lock splintered like firewood. "What happened?" I asked, voice tight. Avery sat across from us. "Your neighbor called it in around 2 a.m., said she heard glass break. Officers responded and found the door forced open and several rooms overturned. Nothing appeared to be stolen, but the place was trashed." Lauren leaned forward. "Was anyone there?" "No, the house was empty when we arrived. But—" He opened a folder and slid a photo toward me. I gasped. It was my mother's locket, crushed. Lauren's hand flew to her mouth. "What the hell?" We found it under the dining table, Avery said. We're running fingerprints, but he hesitated. We did find something else. He pulled out a second photo, a spray-painted message on my bedroom mirror. Stay gone. My stomach dropped. Lauren's voice cracked. Are you serious? I leaned forward. Was it Derek? We can't say yet, but your husband, soon-to-be ex, has already been in touch. He claims it wasn't him. Of course he does, I muttered. We'd like you to come see the property. Confirm what was damaged, what's missing, maybe jog your memory. Lauren looked at me. Are you sure? I nodded. Let's go. The house looked like a war zone. The door had been forced open with a crowbar. Splinters littered the porch. Inside, furniture had been overturned, drawers emptied, cushions slashed. My wedding album lay torn on the floor, its pages ripped like someone had clawed through my memories. I stared at the mirror in the bedroom. The red spray paint dripped like blood. Lauren squeezed my shoulder. This wasn't random. No, I said. It was personal. Detective Avery watched me carefully. Any idea who'd want to scare you off? I took a shaky breath. Only one person benefits if I leave this house behind. He didn't need me to say her name. Celia. I walked through the wreckage, heart aching. In the hallway, I paused in front of the wall of photos. One frame lay shattered on the floor. It was a picture of my mother and me, arms around each other, grinning beneath a 4th of July sky. I bent, picked it up. Someone had gouged a line straight through my face. This was targeted, I said. Avery nodded. We'll do what we can, but unless we find prints or surveillance footage, it's hard to prove. I straightened. I'm going to make sure she has a reason to stay away. Lauren's eyes widened. You have a plan? I nodded. I'm moving back in. The locksmith arrived within the hour. I changed every lock, installed cameras, and even called an old friend from law school who specialized in property law. While Lauren set up the cameras, I scoured the house, reclaiming every inch. The house wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was mine. It was my mother's. Her hands had sewn the curtains, chosen the wall colors, filled the kitchen with laughter and recipes passed down through generations. And Celia had tried to erase all of it. No more. When Derek showed up later that evening, he looked stunned. You're back? I stepped onto the porch, arms crossed. Not just back. I live here. You don't. He blinked. You changed the locks? Yes. I have rights too. I pulled out the deed. Your name's not on the mortgage. Not on the property title. You signed everything over when we refinanced, remember? His face paled. Celia tried to intimidate me. It didn't work. He looked away. I didn't know she'd do that. She's a turned Stewart, and you brought her into my life. That makes you responsible. I can fix this, he said, stepping forward. I held up a hand. No, you had your chance. You chose her. Where am I supposed to go? I shrugged. Try Celia. I hear she's got free time now. I turned, walked back inside, and closed the door in his face. I felt no guilt. Over the next week, I began the process of reclaiming not just the house, but myself. I worked with a legal advisor to draft a formal eviction notice. Though Derek had no legal claim to the property, I wanted everything in writing. I filed for divorce. I replaced the ruined furniture, rehung the photos. I found a local women's group that helped survivors of betrayal and emotional abuse, and I went to every meeting, even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. One night, I found Celia outside, pacing on the sidewalk. She looked thinner, paler. Nice neighborhood, she said. I didn't respond. I didn't mean for things to go that far, she said. It got out of hand. You mean you got caught, I said. She winced. Derek's not who you think he is. I raised an eyebrow. I know exactly who he is now. She fidgeted. I didn't break the mirror. No, I asked. Then who wrote on it? She looked away. I just wanted a place to land, she said quietly. He said you wouldn't come back. He lied. And you believed him. That's your mistake. She stepped back. So this is it? This is me, standing. She left. Weeks passed. The divorce papers went through. I filed a restraining order. I changed my number. I got a dog, a shepherd mix named Maggie, who barked every time someone approached the door. One morning, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. You think this is over? It's not. There was no signature. I stared at it for a long time. Then I picked up the phone. Detective Avery, we have a new problem. The war wasn't over. But neither was I. I was just getting started. Detective Avery arrived less than an hour after I called. This time, he didn't bring a notepad or a partner. Just himself, a calm intensity in his eyes, and a thermal mug that smelled like strong coffee. He held the anonymous letter between gloved fingers, examining the neat, all-caps handwriting. No envelope, he asked. I shook my head. Just that. Slid under the door sometime between midnight and dawn. He nodded. No camera footage? I tapped my phone. Maggie barked around 3:11 a.m., but the outdoor camera froze, glitched. The indoor ones didn't catch anything. He glanced around the living room. You've upgraded. After the break-in, I wasn't taking any chances. Avery's jaw flexed as he pocketed the letter into an evidence bag. We'll analyze it. In the meantime, I'd recommend having someone stay with you, or at least letting the station do regular patrols nearby. I'm not scared, I said. You should be cautious, he countered. Not paranoid, just prepared. I looked at Maggie, curled on the floor near the fireplace. I am. Still, that night, I didn't sleep. I lay on the couch in sweatpants and a hoodie, wrapped in a throw blanket, my eyes fixed on the door. The letter had shifted something inside me. Not fear, no, but urgency, the feeling that whatever Celia or Derek or whoever had started wasn't finished. That I was playing defense in a game where I didn't know the rules. But I was done waiting. The next morning, I met with Claire Haynes, a private investigator. She was ex-military, early 40s, with sharp features and zero patience for nonsense. You're not the first woman to call me after a man left her with chaos and debt, she said, pulling out her notepad. But you're one of the few who came with legal documents and a timeline. I like that. I don't just want to react, I told her. I want the whole picture. I want to know what Celia's hiding, what Derek's hiding, and who wrote that letter. Claire tapped her pen. Let's start with her, Celia Morgan. What do you know? I laid it all out, what I'd gathered from Derek's old texts, bits of conversation, social media breadcrumbs. Claire was already compiling. She has a brother in Boston, I said, but they're estranged. Parents deceased, her resume shaky. She was a personal trainer, then a life coach, then nothing. Claire's lips thinned. People who reinvent themselves that often usually have something to hide. I leaned forward. Find it. While Claire dug into Celia, I focused on the house. I hired a company to scan for bugs. I wasn't being dramatic. I was being thorough. And sure enough, behind a wall panel near the study, they found a small, battery-operated listening device. I stared at it, mouth dry. How long could that have been there? I asked. The tech shrugged. Weeks, months, depends who installed it. Derek? Or Celia? I stored it in a labeled evidence bag, just like Avery had taught me. And I made another call. 2 days later, Claire showed up on my porch with a manila folder and a half-smile that didn't reach her eyes. You were right, she said, walking in without waiting for an invitation. She dropped the folder on the kitchen table. I opened it and froze. Inside were printouts, restraining orders, one from a man in Vermont, another from a former roommate in D.C., allegations of harassment, identity manipulation, even stalking. Celia? I asked. Real name, Cecilia Albright. Morgan is an alias she started using 5 years ago. She's been bouncing between men, jobs, and identities. Always leaves a mess behind. My hands shook as I flipped through the documents. She targets vulnerable people, Claire said. Sick parents, divorces, layoffs. She finds cracks and crawls through them. Derek was her latest host. I sat down slowly. Claire pulled out one last photo. Celia and Derek. A timestamp from 3 months before my mother got sick. They were already having an affair. I thought I was grieving too much to see the truth, I whispered. But it was happening even before that. Claire looked at me carefully. What do you want to do with this? I stared at the photo. I want her out of my life, and I want people to know who she is. Claire smiled. I have just the thing. We filed a restraining order against Celia. With Claire's evidence, it went through easily. The court accepted the alias issue, the pattern of behavior, the threatening note. Celia was ordered to stay 500 feet away from me and my property. But that wasn't enough. With Claire's help, I created a dossier, a clean, objective report. No exaggerations, just the facts. A timeline, legal documents, witness statements. And I mailed it to everyone. Her past employers, her brother, her old landlord, and Derek. I wasn't hiding anymore. The next time Derek showed up, he looked haggard. The confident smirk was gone. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes shadowed. I need to talk, he said. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. Make it fast. He rubbed his hands together. She's gone. Took my laptop, some cash, left while I was at work. Of course she did. He looked up at me. You mailed that file. Yes. I lost my job. I didn't flinch. You lost my trust. Everything else was just borrowed time. He sighed. You were always smarter than me. No, I said. I just stopped pretending. He stepped back. Are you going to destroy me? I tilted my head. You already did that to yourself. He turned and walked down the steps, slower than I'd ever seen him move. Maggie watched from the window. Later that week, I returned to the lawyer's office to finalize the division of assets. Derek didn't contest anything. My lawyer handed me a single envelope. What's this? I asked. Your grandmother's ring, he said. Derek said it was yours. I opened the envelope. There it was. Gold band, blue sapphire. My mother had worn it to her wedding. I slipped it on, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. But it wasn't sadness. It was reclamation. 2 days later, Claire called. You might want to see this, she said. She sent a link. It was a Craigslist ad. A new listing for a life coach and spiritual guide. New name, new city, same photo. Celia, now calling herself Sienna, operating out of Portland. Some people never change, Claire muttered. I stared at the screen. But they leave fingerprints. Claire chuckled. You want to go after her? I shook my head. No, I'm done chasing ghosts. But I'll keep the receipts. Summer arrived. I repainted the guest room. I planted a garden. Lauren visited every week with a bottle of wine and her newest dating disasters. Maggie barked less and cuddled more. One night, I sat on the porch with a journal. I opened it, hesitated, then began to write. I lost everything I thought made me whole. My mother, my marriage, my illusions. But I gained clarity, strength, a voice I forgot I had. I closed the journal and looked at the stars. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel broken. I felt rebuilt. And tomorrow? Tomorrow I'd begin again. It started with a letter. Unlike the last one, this envelope had a stamp, a return address. Neat handwriting, written in the curling, overly practiced script of someone trying too hard to appear elegant. Celia. I knew it before I opened it. I sat at the kitchen table with Maggie curled under my feet, her breath rhythmic and calm. I stared at the envelope for a full 2 minutes before finally sliding a knife under the seal. Inside was a single sheet of linen paper. Amelia, *Samem Mil. I won't pretend to apologize. Not because I'm not sorry, but because I know you wouldn't believe me. There are things I can't explain, choices I can't undo. I wanted to write this before I disappeared completely. You deserved the truth. At least once. Nudie, you were never supposed to be part of this. My pulse thudded. That line. What did she mean? I kept reading. Derek told me about your mother's illness the night we met. That's how it started. That's how he broke. I didn't mean to seduce him. But grief has a way of making people cling to anything that breathes. I became his breath, his anchor. He hated himself for it, but he never stopped. Milais smangos, I didn't expect to fall in love, and I didn't expect you to fight backs. Milais smangos, puxies, smangos, puxies. Smangar than you look, I see that now. Smangos, milais smangos, puxies. Smangos, milais smangos, puxies. Milais smangos. He's not finished. Times asterisk. See Hazarpians mangos. The page crinkled in my hands. He's not finished. I reached for my phone and called Claire. We met at a diner halfway between her office and my neighborhood, a quiet little place with cracked leather booths and a jukebox that hadn't worked since 2002. I slid the letter across the table. Claire read it once, twice, her jaw tensed. You believe her? She asked. About Derek? She nodded. I exhaled. I didn't, until that last line. Claire tapped the table. He's still emailing you, isn't he? I nodded. Every 3 or 4 days, just enough to stay relevant. Still using the same tone? I opened my email, showed her. Just wanted to check in. Hope Maggie's well, I'm getting help. Maybe one day we can talk. Claire grunted. Classic manipulation. He doesn't want reconciliation. He wants relevance, control. So what do we do? I asked. She looked at me. We dig. Claire started with financials. She had contacts in banks, old law firms, tax offices. Within a week, she'd compiled a dossier thicker than the one on Celia. Derek had debts, big ones, gambling debts, credit card stacks hidden under false accounts. Even a small offshore transfer 2 months before Mom passed, one he'd disguised as a business trip. But it was something else that caught Claire's eye. An LLC, registered under Derek's name, formed 6 months ago, no public business listed. He's hiding something, she said, flipping the file shut. Possibly funneling assets, maybe Celia helped. I leaned back. But why now? He's already lost the house, the divorce is done. Claire gave me a flat look. Because control isn't about legal ownership. It's psychological, emotional. If he can't have you, he'll ruin what you love. Like Maggie. She blinked. He threatened the dog? I shook my head. Not directly, but in his emails he keeps asking about her, like she's a weak spot. Claire folded her arms. We need to cut off contact. Completely, full block. I did, 3 times. He keeps making new accounts. Claire's eyes narrowed. Then we escalate. That night I filed for a second restraining order, this time with a digital component. We flagged his email IPs, reported his aliases. It was tedious, exhausting work, but necessary. Still, the next morning there was another message. This time, it wasn't an email. It was a voicemail. Vaidostia. His voice. Low, measured, cold. Porf poi wysod, you always thought you were smarter, but this game doesn't end until I say it does. I sat frozen, Maggie whining beside me. Then I called Claire. She arrived in 20 minutes. You need a panic button, she said. A real one. Remote security, multiple redundancies. I nodded. Do it. We spent the next 2 days turning my home into a fortress. Infrared motion sensors, smart locks, panic latches, silent alarms. I trained Maggie with new commands. And then, nothing. Silence. 3 days passed, then 4. No emails, no calls, no sightings. I started to breathe again. I even started smiling. Lauren invited me to a painting class at a community studio downtown. It was messy and ridiculous, and healing in ways I hadn't expected. We drank boxed wine, painted with our hands, and laughed until we cried. I left that night feeling like my chest had space again. When I pulled into the driveway, Maggie didn't bark. That should have been my first clue. I walked to the front door, unlocked. That was the second. Inside, the lights were on. The third clue was the smell. Cologne. Familiar. I stepped into the living room. and there he was. Derek, sitting on the couch, legs crossed, sipping from one of my glasses like he'd never left. "Hello, Amelia," he said. My breath caught. "You need to leave." "I will," he said, "but we need to talk first." I reached for my phone. "No signal," he said, holding up a small jammer. "Don't worry, I'm not here to hurt you." Maggie growled from the hallway. "She's locked in the pantry," he said. "Safe, for now." My hands shook. "You're breaking the law," I said. "I'm fixing a mistake." "You're making more." He stood. "You think this is about *U. It's not. It's about what you took from me." "I took nothing," I whispered. "You took control. The house. The reputation. You sent that file to my employer." "You deserved it." His jaw flexed. "I made a mistake, but I didn't deserve to be ruined." I stepped back. "Get out." He didn't move. I pressed the panic button on my bracelet. Silent, but blinking green. He didn't notice. "You know what I realized?" he said. "You were never better than me. You were just lucky. You had your mother, your support, that house. I had to earn everything." "I earned it too," I said, "with sacrifice, with work, with honor. Asterisk?" He sneered. "Honor doesn't matter anymore." Suddenly, red and blue lights flashed outside. He turned. Too late. The door burst open. 2 officers tackled him to the ground. Maggie barked wildly from the pantry. I fell to my knees, breath coming in shallow bursts. Claire stepped in behind the officers, eyes sharp. "You all right?" she asked. I nodded. "Let's get the statement now, while it's fresh." I looked at Derek, handcuffed on the floor. He wasn't a monster. He was a coward. And I was done being afraid of cowards. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. The trial date was set for mid-July. Unlawful entry. Violating a restraining order. Tampering with a household animal. Derek was facing real charges, with real consequences. But in the weeks leading up to the hearing, my life didn't slow down. If anything, it sharpened. Everything became more vivid, more decisive, like my body had finally learned to operate without the weights of grief and betrayal pulling at my heels. Mornings started with Maggie in the garden. She'd sniff the rows of herbs, then curl beside my Adirondack chair while I drank tea and wrote in my journal. Claire still checked in regularly, part investigator, part silent bodyguard. Lauren, of course, remained my heartbeat, coming over with spicy takeout and sarcastic commentary that made every long day end with a laugh. But I still slept with a baseball bat under the bed. Not because I feared Derek returning, I knew he wouldn't risk another arrest. I kept the bat for the principal. 2 weeks before the trial, I got a call from Detective Avery. "There's been a development," he said. "We caught Celia." I nearly dropped the phone. "She's in custody?" "No," he said, "but we know where she is. And she's been flagged for questioning in a related identity theft investigation." I blinked. "Related?" "She used your information, Amelia, applied for 2 credit cards in your name. She must have gotten your details while she was in the house, likely while Derek was still pretending he had control." My skin crawled. "How bad is it?" 2 open accounts. Minimal charges, but we've frozen them. You won't be liable. We're working with federal agents now. If she's caught, they'll contact you." I hung up and stared at the ceiling. Even in exile, Celia had been crawling through the wreckage. And yet, something inside me felt calm. She was no longer a storm. She was just a shadow. And I had sunlight again. On the morning of the hearing, I wore black. Not because I was mourning, but because I wanted to be the last thing Derek saw before the gavel came down. Claire came with me. So did Lauren. The courtroom was small. Padded benches, worn carpet, a tired judge who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Derek sat at the defense table, his posture rigid. He'd shaved, wore a suit, but nothing could hide the hollowness in his eyes. I took the stand. I told the truth, calm, controlled, measured. About the betrayal, the letters, the trespassing, the night he locked Maggie in the pantry and threatened me with his silence. The judge asked questions. I answered every single one. When the verdict came, it wasn't dramatic. No slamming of gavels or shouts across the courtroom. Just a simple, guilty on 2 counts, sentencing to follow. Derek didn't look at me. He was sentenced to 1 year probation, mandatory therapy, and community service. No jail time. But the restraining order was extended by 5 years. He couldn't come within a mile of me. When I walked out of that courthouse, I felt taller. Not because I had won, because I had survived. In the weeks after, I started rebuilding, not just emotionally, but professionally. I applied for a role at a nonprofit focused on housing legal aid for women escaping domestic manipulation and financial abuse. It was exactly the kind of work I never thought I'd be qualified for. But then I remembered I was qualified. Not just with my law degree, but with every scar I carried. The director, a woman named Nadine, called me the day after my interview. "We need someone like you," she said. "You're not just experienced, you're anchored." I accepted. By early fall, I had transformed the spare bedroom into a home office. The same room where Celia had once laid her handbag and heels like she owned the place was now full of case files, law books, and a vision board titled, "Own Your Power." Claire helped me put together workshops. Lauren helped with social media campaigns. We had over 100 women sign up in the first 2 months. One night, I stood in front of a group of 12 women seated in folding chairs at a church basement. Some had bruises that hadn't faded. Others had wounds no one could see. All of them looked like I had felt once, torn in two. I cleared my throat. "My name is Amelia DeWitt," I said. "And I used to think strength was silence, that surviving meant staying quiet. But I was wrong. Strength is naming your pain, reclaiming your voice, and reminding the world that you exist." A woman in the back started to cry. I didn't stop speaking. That winter, I visited my mother's grave for the first time since the day we buried her. The snow was light. A gentle dusting covered the headstone. I brushed it off and sat on the little bench beside it. "Hey, Mom," I whispered. "You'd hate the drama, but you'd love the ending." I told her everything. About the letters, the trial, the nonprofit, Maggie. Then I pulled the locket from my coat and opened it. Her picture smiled up at me. "I'm okay now," I whispered. "Really." The wind picked up, just enough to rustle the pages of my journal. I smiled and left the locket at the base of the stone. On New Year's Eve, Lauren and I hosted a party. Just 10 people, loud music, glitter, champagne. At midnight, she kissed her new girlfriend, and I hugged Maggie so hard, she whined. When I looked up, I saw fireworks through the kitchen window. Red, blue, white. Not the kind of lights that came with police cars. Just celebration. And I thought, this is it. Not a new life. Not a clean slate. Just this. Peace. Enough. My phone buzzed. A new email. From a blocked address. Pranat, Happy New Year, Amelia. Still watching. See such toss. I stared at it. Then I hit report and deleted it. Because she wasn't my storm anymore. She was just static. Then I hit. It was early spring when the next ripple broke the surface. I had almost let myself believe it was over. The email had been the last thread Celia could tug on, or so I thought. I deleted it, reported the address, and installed one final security suite across every device I owned. Claire said it best. Static gets quieter when you stop tuning in. And for a time, it did. Until Maggie started acting strange. She would bark at the same corner of the backyard fence every morning like clockwork. Not a frantic bark. An alert. A warning. I checked the yard, checked the gate. Nothing out of place. No tracks in the soft soil. But she kept doing it. Then one morning, I found a cigarette butt on my porch railing. I don't smoke, none of my neighbors do. The next day, it was a torn page from a paperback, one I recognized, a copy of *Gone Girl*, I had donated months earlier. Someone was watching me. Not a ghost, not static. Someone real. Claire showed up in under 2 hours, notepad and tactical bag in hand. She did a sweep, installed new motion sensors, rechecked all the locks. "I don't like this," she said. "Someone wants to shake your cage." "Derek?" I asked. She shook her head. "Too public. He's still under probation, not even breathing sideways right now. If he slips, he goes to jail." "Then who?" Claire tapped her pen. "Someone who knows you. Someone who doesn't want to hurt you yet, but wants you on edge. Celia," I whispered. She nodded. "It fits. But she's quiet lately, off the radar, no online activity, no known sightings." I frowned. "That's not comforting." "No," Claire said, "it's not." A week later, I found the Polaroid. It was inside my mailbox, between a catalog and a credit card offer. It showed the back of my house. Taken at night. One window was lit. My bedroom. The silhouette of my lamp cast across the curtain like a bullseye. No note, just the photo. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did Maggie. Claire took the photo and installed a sensor-activated trail camera facing the backyard. We agreed on a 3-night rotation. She'd sleep on my couch every other night, and I'd sleep with my phone set to alert if any camera tripped. The first 2 nights were quiet. The third wasn't. At 3:14 a.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert. Maggie growled. I crept to the window. Someone stood at the edge of the fence line, just beyond the camera's view. Claire was already up, flashlight and pepper spray in hand. She crept out the side door, silent as smoke. I stayed inside, heart pounding. Then a shout. "Don't move!" A scuffle. Footsteps pounding away. By the time I reached the yard, Claire was bent over, hands on knees, panting. "Got a partial," she said. "Woman, hoodie, about your height, fast." "She see you?" Claire nodded. "She'll think twice before coming back." We checked the cameras. Blurry figure, no face. But she had dropped something. A bracelet. Cheap, plastic, but I recognized it. It had been in my junk drawer, missing for weeks. She'd been Minside. The next day, I met with Nadine, the director of the nonprofit where I now worked. "You sure you're okay to keep working through this?" she asked gently. I nodded. "This work grounds me, helps me feel stronger." She smiled. "You're one of the best advocates we've got, but don't forget, you're allowed to rest too." I thanked her and left with a folder full of intake forms and stories, women trying to escape men who erased them. But what happens when the threat isn't a man? What happens when the predator wears perfume and smiles with her teeth? Claire pulled a favor from an old contact in Oregon. Celia, or Sienna as she called herself now, had reportedly skipped out on a rental agreement, left behind several IDs, and a notebook filled with scribbles about correction and exposure. "She's not moving on," Claire said. "She's circling." I leaned back, rubbing my temples. "Why me?" Claire was quiet for a beat. "Because you beat her. Most people don't." It wasn't ego, it was fact. Celia latched onto the weak, the grieving, the disconnected. But I had connected, to others, to myself, to something stronger. And she hated that. Another letter came. Typed. No signature. "Tumters, you think safety is real. It's not. Locks can be picked, dogs can be poisoned, walls can fall. You just haven't lost enough yet." I handed it to Claire without reading it again. She exhaled through her nose. "This is an escalation. You need to go public." "What do you mean?" "Tell your story, on record, with detail, not just at workshops or seminars, online, on paper. Let her know the spotlight's on her." "You think that'll scare her off?" Claire nodded. "Narcissists hate exposure more than anything." So I did. The blog post went live 2 days later. What happens after you leave the monster? I changed names, left out details that couldn't be traced. But I told the truth. The betrayal, the invasion, the manipulation, the slow unraveling of a woman who once believed love was safety. And how I rebuilt. The post spread like wildfire. Shared across forums, women's groups, survivor pages, messages poured in. Stories that mirrored mine, stories that made mine look tame. And then, silence. 2 weeks. No letters, no photos, no movement. Claire nodded. She's either hiding or she's looking for her next target. I felt sick. We have to warn people. So I expanded the post into a series. Signs of identity manipulation. Patterns of calculated abuse. Legal resources for women dealing with nonviolent predators. By the end of the month, I had a column in a local paper and a podcast offer. The voice she tried to steal was now amplified. Then, on a Thursday morning, I opened my front door to find an envelope taped to the glass. No handwriting. Just a single printed sentence on a white sheet. Silence is safer. I called the police. They dusted it for prints. Nothing. Claire looked at me, eyes sharper than ever. She's daring you to keep talking. I smiled. Then, I'll never shut up. That night, I sat at my desk and outlined a book. Chapter 1. She moved in while I was at my mother's funeral. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was documenting. I wrote the first draft in 4 weeks. It poured out of me. Not just the events, the funeral, the betrayal, the woman in my living room, but the sounds, the smells, the sharp sting of humiliation on my skin like frostbite. Every chapter bled truth. I wrote until my hands ached, until Maggie curled beside my chair and sighed like even she understood the exorcism taking place. I titled the manuscript Nace while I was burying my mother. The final paragraph read, I survived a woman who moved into my home like a guest and carved herself into my life like a parasite. I survived a man who mistook silence for permission. And I survived the echo of their chaos. But I'm not here because I want revenge. I'm here because I want others to know it's survivable, that your voice is the blade they never see coming. Lauren read it first. She stayed up all night, finishing it in one sitting, texting me every 20 minutes with things like, page 37, I want to set him on fire, and chapter 9 made me cry in public. Claire read it next. Her notes were short, clear, brutal, real, cut nothing. Nadine sent it to her agent. The agent asked if I was willing to go public. I said yes. I was done hiding. The book deal came quicker than I expected. A modest advance. A 2-book agreement. Memoir and follow-up guide for survivors. Lauren bought a bottle of champagne we couldn't pronounce and popped it in the middle of my driveway. Maggie got wet. We laughed until we fell over. You do realize, she said between hiccups, that you're about to become dangerously influential, right? Claire clinked glasses with me. More visible means more protected, more believed, and more women will see themselves in your pages. I looked at the stars. I hope so. And I meant it. But peace never lasts long when you've outlived your abusers. 1 week after the book deal was announced, I got a package. No return address, hand-delivered. Inside was a flash drive. Claire and I plugged it into her laptop, scanned it with every antivirus tool we had. Then we opened it. One folder. Titled, Inside Her House. My stomach twisted. Inside were photos, dozens, all time-stamped between February and May. Me, in the backyard with Maggie. Me, in the kitchen pouring coffee. Me, asleep on the living room couch with a book on my chest. Every photo was taken from sun inside Tan in the house. Claire closed the laptop slowly. She never left, I whispered. No, Claire said. She was watching, waiting, planning. I felt sick. Claire stood. We need to check the crawl space. What? She was already grabbing a flashlight. Come on. We opened the hatch in the utility room. dust, insulation, the low hum of old pipes. And one thing more? A sleeping bag, a battery-powered lantern, a box of granola bars, an empty water bottle. Claire crouched low, swore under her breath. She squatted here, maybe for days, maybe longer. I covered my mouth. "Let's call Avery," Claire said, "right now." Detective Avery arrived within 30 minutes, crime scene team in tow. They bagged the sleeping bag, the lantern, the wrappers. Claire handed over the flash drive. "This is the work of someone unhinged," Avery said. "She's escalating again," Claire added. "Can you track her?" I asked. "We'll try, but she's a ghost when she wants to be." "She lived under my feet," I whispered, "while I cooked, slept, showered." Avery nodded. "And now we expose her, formally." The news broke a week later. Author and advocate Amelia DeWitt, stalked by fugitive woman linked to multiple identity crimes. My publisher arranged a media rep. Claire sat through every interview with me. Lauren handled my social media. Support poured in, thousands of messages, readers, survivors, allies. And one voicemail. Blocked number. Female voice. "You're so dramatic, Amelia. You think exposure makes you powerful. But you're still the girl who cried on her porch while I sat on your couch." Claire recorded it, handed it to Avery. He played it 3 times. "She's baiting you," he said. I nodded. "Then let's set a trap." We staged a live interview, public, well advertised. Claire arranged undercover surveillance. Police posted in unmarked vans outside the venue. The interviewer asked about healing, about forgiveness. I looked straight into the camera. Forgiveness is something I give to myself, not to the people who tried to destroy me, because I'm not angry anymore. I'm aware, and no one gets to dim my voice ever again. Afterward, Claire pulled me aside. She was there. I froze. Outside. 2 blocks down. We got her on camera. But she slipped away again. I swallowed hard. "So she knows." Claire nodded. "But so does the world now." The book launched. Bestseller in a week. I started receiving speaking invitations, podcasts, conferences. Women's shelters requested copies. Therapists read excerpts to clients. At one event, a woman approached me after the Q&A. She was in her 50s, wore a scarf around her neck like armor. "My daughter read your book," she said. "She left an abusive partner last month. Because of you." I hugged her. That night, I cried. Not from fear, not from grief, from purpose. But Celia wasn't finished. On the night of my first out-of-state speaking engagement, Claire stayed at my house with Maggie. At 3:42 a.m., the house alarm triggered. Claire called me instantly. She tried to break in, rear entrance, masked, but she ran when the lights came on. "She knew I wasn't home," I whispered. "She's watching more than just your socials," Claire said. "She has eyes." "But she's slipping," I said. "She's getting desperate." Claire agreed. 2 days later, Celia was caught. Airport security in Denver flagged her ID as fake. The facial recognition system flagged her as a match to a wanted woman in multiple states. She was detained. I received the call while walking through a park near my hotel. Avery's voice on the line. "We've got her, Amelia. She's in custody." I didn't answer for a moment. The wind was soft. A bird chirped nearby. "I'm safe," I said quietly. "Yes," he replied. "And so is every woman she'll never touch again." I sat on a bench. Called Lauren. Then Claire. Then my editor. And then I just sat. Still. Present. Alive. Celia pled not guilty. But the evidence spoke louder than her lawyers. Photos, emails, the crawl space, the flash drive. Her trial became national news. They called her the guest that wouldn't leave. But I knew better. She wasn't a guest. She was an invader. And now she would never have another home that wasn't behind bars. On the day the verdict came in, guilty on all counts, I stood in my garden with Maggie at my side. Lauren brought over cupcakes. Claire brought champagne. Nadine brought a printed banner that read, "You wrote it, you lived it, you beat it." We toasted, laughed, cried. Then I brought out a new notebook. On the cover, Tyre Volume 2. Because this wasn't just the end. It was the beginning of something bigger. Of what happens when the broken rebuild. And write the blueprint for others to follow. The morning after the verdict, the air felt different. Not just lighter, cleaner. Like the world had pressed a reset button, just for me. There were no helicopters overhead, no patrol cars outside, no letters taped to my door. Only sunlight. And Maggie, her ears perked, and her tail wagging at the breeze that drifted through the open window. Celia Albright, a.k.a. Morgan, a.k.a. Sienna, a.k.a. every other name she'd worn like a mask, was behind bars. And I was free. It didn't feel like victory. Not the way I expected. It felt like reclamation. The first thing I did was visit the courthouse. Not to see her. To see the records clerk. Claire met me there, wearing her usual leather jacket and a smirk that could slice steel. "I know that look," she said. "What are we doing?" I slid a folder across the desk. Inside, a petition to seal all court records involving my mother's will, the estate, and the refinancing that had left the house vulnerable. "Closing doors," I said. Claire raised her eyebrows. "Finally ready?" I nodded. To protect what's mine. And what was mine wasn't just the house. It was my shum story. The second book was already in development. The publisher had sent over a cover mock-up, a bold title across a field of shattered glass. Knock shucks, what you don't see is still there. It would cover the aftermath, the rebuilding, the shadows that linger even when you think the lights are on. I'd already written 3 chapters. But it wasn't just about writing anymore. Women from around the world had started contacting me. Survivors, advocates, even therapists. My inbox overflowed with requests, panels, podcasts, partnerships. And buried in one email was a name I hadn't expected. Times, Dr. Mina Havel, University of Leeds. She was a trauma psychology researcher working on a cross-continental study of psychological stalking and nonviolent abuse patterns. She had read my book. Her subject pool included 34 women. I would be the 35th. We met over Zoom. She had a kind face, tight curls in a bun, and glasses that kept slipping down her nose. "You're one of the first cases," she said, "where the abuser was another woman, non-romantic, parasitic in nature, identity infiltrating rather than physically violent." I stared. "Is that rare?" "Rarely documented," she said, "but not rare. You've given language to a kind of wound we're only just beginning to measure." I signed on. Not just as a subject. As a contributor. My writing would appear in the study. My experience would guide how survivors were treated. My voice, again, would do more than echo. It would educate. Claire and I met at the local coffee shop later that week. She had a new case, a stack of folders, and a smile she rarely showed. "You want in?" she asked, flipping a file toward me. I blinked. "In?" She grinned. "I'm forming a legal consultancy. For high-conflict, domestic fallout. Financial abuse. Digital harassment. Identity fraud. I've got clients. I need someone who knows how to make a courtroom bleed on command." I laughed. "You mean testify?" "I mean educate, asterisk," she said. "You're the voice they don't expect, the one that breaks their narratives." I sipped my coffee and said yes. In May, the nonprofit where I worked launched its first annual summit. The theme, "When Safety is an Illusion." Over 200 women came. Social workers, lawyers, therapists, survivors. I gave the keynote. On the stage, I saw Lauren in the front row, hands clasped tight. Claire leaned against the exit sign in the back, arms crossed, eyes sharp. I spoke without notes. I used to think I knew what danger looked like. I thought it wore a mask of anger, or fists, or shouting. But danger can smile. It can wear perfume. It can make tea in your kitchen and ask how you're holding up. Danger doesn't always break down your door. Sometimes, it uses a spare key you didn't know it had. Silence. Then a standing ovation. And after, a line of women. One by one, they hugged me. One by one, they said the same thing. You told my time story. Later that summer, I took a trip, alone, to the Scottish Highlands. No agenda, no panels, no podcasts. Just me, a backpack, and Maggie. We stayed in a cottage near a loch, surrounded by mist and silence so complete I could hear my own thoughts uncluttered. I walked trails, read poetry, cooked with whatever I could forage or buy from the tiny market down the hill. I journaled every night. One entry read, "Freedom doesn't feel like flying. It feels like standing still and realizing the earth beneath you isn't shaking anymore." And it was true. One night, I dreamt of my mother. We were in the kitchen. She was making soup, stirring the pot with that chipped wooden spoon she never replaced. She looked up at me. "You kept the house warm," she said. I woke up crying. But not sad. Just full. When I returned, a letter was waiting. Stamped, postmarked from Oregon. I opened it cautiously. Inside, a single check. Derek's signature. A note clipped to it. "Stam's final restitution payment. Don't contact me again." Do. Claire reviewed it, confirmed its legitimacy. Lauren suggested we burn it ceremonially. I cashed it. Then donated the full amount to the nonprofit's legal aid fund. Because healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means transforming. That fall, the University of Leeds published the study. My essay was cited in several academic journals. NPR ran a segment on identity manipulation in domestic settings. My voice was reaching people I would never meet. My scars were maps. And others were following. By December, I had a new manuscript finished. This one wasn't a memoir. It was a guidebook. Time's Exit Strategy, a practical handbook for women navigating invisible abuse. Claire wrote the foreword. Lauren wrote the final chapter. Maggie got her photo on the back cover. We launched it with a live stream that drew over 50,000 viewers. Halfway through, someone posted a comment. Times asterisk. I thought I was alone. This saved me. Asterisk. That was enough. More than enough. And then I started dreaming again. Not of the past. Of the future. Of building something bigger. Not just a consultancy. Not just books. An institute. A place where women could go before the breaking point. Where stories weren't just shared, but protected, archived, studied, listened to. I started writing the proposal. Nadine offered to co-lead. Claire promised security. Lauren said, "We'll need wine." And I said, "We'll need land." Because I wanted this institute to have walls, gardens, a library, a dog park, a classroom where healing didn't look like tears, but looked like fire. Not the kind that burns down homes. The kind that builds new ones. It was just the beginning, but it felt like everything. And this time, no one was moving in uninvited. I sipped my coffee and said yes. In May, the nonprofit where I worked launched its first annual summit. The theme, When Safety is an Illusion. Over 200 women came, social workers, lawyers, therapists, survivors. I gave the keynote. On the stage, I saw Lauren in the front row, hands clasped tight. Claire leaned against the exit sign in the back, arms crossed, eyes sharp. I spoke without notes. I used to think I knew what danger looked like. I thought it wore a mask of anger, or fists, or shouting. But danger can smile. It can wear perfume. It can make tea in your kitchen. and ask how you're holding up. Danger doesn't always break down your door. Sometimes, it uses a spare key you didn't know it had. Silence. Then a standing ovation. And after, a line of women. One by one, they hugged me. One by one, they said the same thing. You told my story. Later that summer, I took a trip, alone, to the Scottish Highlands. No agenda, no panels, no podcasts. Just me, a backpack, and Maggie. We stayed in a cottage near a loch, surrounded by mist and silence so complete I could hear my own thoughts uncluttered. I walked trails, read poetry, cooked with whatever I could forage or buy from the tiny market down the hill. I journaled every night. One entry read, "Freedom doesn't feel like flying. It feels like standing still and realizing the earth beneath you isn't shaking anymore." And it was true. One night I dreamt of my mother. We were in the kitchen. She was making soup, stirring the pot with that chipped wooden spoon she never replaced. She looked up at me. "You kept the house warm," she said. I woke up crying, but not sad. Just full, Zereso. When I returned, a letter was waiting. Stamped, postmarked from Oregon. I opened it cautiously. Inside, a single check. Derek's signature. A note clipped to it. Nomsheim's final restitution payment. Don't contact me again. Thanks. Claire reviewed it, confirmed its legitimacy. Lauren suggested we burn it ceremonially. I cashed it. Then donated the full amount to the nonprofit's legal aid fund. Because healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means hamo-transforming. That fall, the University of Leeds published the study. My essay was cited in several academic journals. NPR ran a segment on identity manipulation in domestic settings. My voice was reaching people I would never meet. My scars were maps. And others were following. By December, I had a new manuscript finished. This one wasn't a memoir. It was a guidebook. Syme's Exit Strategy, a practical handbook for women navigating invisible abuse. Claire wrote the foreword. Lauren wrote the final chapter. Maggie got her photo on the back cover. We launched it with a live stream that drew over 50,000 viewers. Halfway through, someone posted a comment. Cheese asterisk. I thought I was alone. This saved me. Asterisk. That was enough. More than enough. And then I started dreaming again. Not of the past. Of the future. Of building something bigger. Bigger. Not just a consultancy. Not just books. An institute. A place where women could go before the breaking point. Where stories weren't just shared, but protected, archived, studied, listened to. I started writing the proposal. Nadine offered to co-lead. Claire promised security. Lauren said, "We'll need wine." And I said, "We'll need land." Because I wanted this institute to have walls, gardens, a library, a dog park, a classroom where healing didn't look like tears, but looked like fire. Not the kind that burns down homes. The kind that builds new ones. It was just the beginning. But it felt like everything. And this time, no one was moving in uninvited. Winter came hard that year. Snow blanketed the fields around Marrow, layering thick over the cabins, crunching under boots like brittle bones. The lavender garden browned and slept. The trees bowed under frost. But inside the farmhouse, the fire never went out. Maggie learned to wear a sweater. Lauren learned to make cider from scratch. And the women, the ones who had arrived in pieces, grew louder, braver. One night, I walked past the kitchen and heard laughter, real, guttural laughter, from a room that had once held only whispers. That was when I knew Marrow had become more than a shelter. It had become a Strice village. In January, the Institute received its first government grant. It wasn't huge, but it was official. The letter came on heavy paper with embossed headers and too many signatures. I read it twice, Claire read it once, grunted, and said, "Told you." Lauren cried, "This means you're real now, like, legally real." Nadine laughed, signing the acceptance form. "We've always been real." But now we had funding to expand. That meant 3 new staff positions. And 1 unexpected applicant. Her name was Kaylin. She arrived on a Tuesday, resume in hand, looking too young to have seen what her file implied. During her interview, she told me she had survived a digital coercion ring in university, one led by a professor. "He never laid a hand on me," she said, "but he made me feel like my life was inside his." Her GPA had dropped. She'd lost her scholarship, changed cities, started over. "I want to be the voice I didn't have," she said. I hired her. By spring, she was running our digital literacy workshops. And every woman who attended left with more than tech skills. They left with permission house. In March, we held our first alumni reunion. 17 women returned. Some brought children. Some brought stories. All brought scars, visible and not. We held it in the barn, newly restored with heaters and fairy lights strung across the rafters. Lauren cooked a feast. Claire stood guard with hot cocoa in one hand and her ever-present penknife in the other. I stood at the front and said, "You are not who you were when you arrived. You are not who they told you to be. You are not broken. You are asterisk in bloom. Asterisk." We toasted to survival. And to each other. That night, one of the women, Evelyn, pulled me aside. She had a notebook in her hands. "I started writing again," she whispered, "after I read your second book." She handed me the notebook. "I haven't shown anyone," she added, "but maybe it's time." I read the first page. It began. He never called me a name. He just erased mine. I looked at her. "This is powerful." She looked down. "I'm scared." "So was I said. That's how I knew it mattered. By April, word had spread. National coalitions reached out. Law schools sent interns. A senator's aide emailed asking for a tour. Nadine arranged a private walkthrough. Claire swept the grounds twice. I gave the presentation. The aide left with a signed copy of Asterix's exit strategy and tears in her eyes. "Thank you for naming the things no one sees," she whispered. But for every light there was a shadow. And one arrived in the form of a letter, postmarked from a private facility. Derek. It had been over a year since I'd seen his handwriting. The letter was 6 pages long. It opened with an apology. But it wasn't an apology to me. It was to Asterisk himself, about how he'd lost control, how Celia had manipulated him, how prison would have been better than living with what he'd become. And then the pivot. He'd found God, he was getting help, he wanted to make amends through service. He asked if he could volunteer. At Maritime. I didn't laugh. I didn't rage. I passed the letter to Claire. She read it in one sitting, then shredded it in silence. "I don't even want his footsteps near this soil," she muttered. Lauren threw salt out the window for good measure. We never spoke of it again. But it stayed with me, not as a threat, as a reminder. That power taken can become power reclaimed. That the people who tried to silence you will always underestimate what happens when you survive. In May, we hosted our first all-day intensive. Unspoken armor, understanding emotional sabotage and psychological entrapment. 80 women attended. Kaylin led the morning workshop on digital red flags. Claire taught a self-defense segment in the meadow, barefoot and wild-eyed. I closed the day with a fireside Q&A. One question stuck with me. "How do you know it's really over?" I paused. Then said, "You don't. But you learn how to keep living anyway. You build a life so bright they have to squint to even glance at it. And when the fear comes back, which it might, you remind it, this is your story now." Silence. Then clapping. Then tears. And then someone whispered. She said what I couldn't. By summer we had wait lists. Women from 5 different states. We added new cabins. installed a security drone system, partnered with local mental health clinics for trauma-specific referrals. I trained new staff in narrative therapy. We launched an online course. A podcaster named Jasmine turned our story into a 6-part series. It hit 1 million downloads in 4 weeks. My inbox exploded. And so did my resolve. In July, Evelyn's manuscript was accepted by a small publisher. She called crying. I sent flowers. Then she said the thing I didn't know I needed to hear. You made it safe for me to speak. You made me brave by being loud. That night I walked the edge of the field with Maggie, watched the wind roll through tall grass, and whispered, "Thank you, Celia." Not for the pain, but for being the match. Because I was the one who built the fire. August bled into September with a kind of golden peace. The kind of peace I used to think was fictional, reserved for novels or coffee commercials, or lives I'd never be allowed to lead. But there I was, waking up to birdsong, writing with Maggie at my feet, watching sunflowers turn toward the sky. The Marrow Institute was in full bloom. We'd just passed our 1-year anniversary. We hosted a celebration in the meadow with lanterns and fire pits, folding chairs arranged in wide circles. Survivors stood up one by one and told stories, not just of pain, but of healing, laughter, small victories. I bought my own car, said one woman. I slept through the night without fear, said another. My daughter smiled for the first time in months, said a third. When it was my turn, I stepped up with a paper in my pocket I didn't need to read from. You are not your silence, I said. You are not their denial. You are not what happened to you. You are what came after. And what comes after that is entirely yours. Cheers. Hugs. A string of paper stars handed out, each one with a word. Light, brave, home, reels. Later that night, Claire pulled me aside. You know you've built something no one can unbuild, right? I nodded. That's the point. In October, I was invited to keynote at a global trauma symposium in Geneva. Lauren flew with me. Claire insisted on pre-clearing the hotel. Nadine cried at the airport, then handed me a folder of talking points I already knew by heart. The auditorium was massive. Walls of glass, velvet curtains, women in suits with translators whispering in their ears. My speech was titled, How a Funeral, a Betrayal, and a Lockpick Taught Me More Than Any Law Degree. The audience laughed. Then they leaned in. I told them about my mother, about Derek, about Celia, about the crawl space, about rebuilding, about naming things, about what comes times tamter. When I finished, the room stood. All of it. Not because I was special. Because I was familiar. Because every woman in that room had once been cornered by silence and had chosen to speak anyway. Afterward, a woman from Lithuania hugged me. My daughter thought she was crazy. You proved she wasn't. A psychologist from Johannesburg asked to translate my book. An advocate from Seoul invited me to speak at her university. My passport filled with purpose. So did my heart. By December, the Institute had helped 314 women. 42 had returned as volunteers. 7 had published essays. 2 had started their own shelters. 1 was now in law school. Evelyn's book had hit bestseller lists. She dedicated it to the woman who turned her survival into a lighthouse. I framed that line, hung it in the farmhouse hallway. But then, on Christmas Eve, something unexpected arrived. A letter. From Celia. Forwarded from the prison. I stared at it for a full day, then opened it. It was short. Nast Srahaloistreksk, Amelia, asterisk. They're transferring me to a long-term facility. I've been diagnosed. It doesn't excuse anything. But it does explain some things. I won't ask for forgiveness. I know that's not mine to have. But I am sorry for everything I broke. Thank you for surviving me. Times asterisk. C. Times asterisk. I read it 3 times. Then placed it in a folder marked Closed Chapters. Forgiveness wasn't mine to give. Closure was. And I had it. New Year's Eve came quietly. Snow drifted outside the farmhouse. Maggie lay curled beside the fire. Claire drank cider on the porch. Lauren slow danced with her girlfriend in the common room while Nadine strung up paper lanterns with resident kids. At midnight, we released wishes into the sky. Mine simply read, "Keep telling the truth." Spring brought blossoms and new faces. Among them, a mother and teen daughter. The girl, Noelle, barely spoke for the first week. Then one night she knocked on my office door. "Can I read you something?" she asked. She held a notebook. I nodded. She read a poem. It began. She thought she was a ghost, but ghosts don't bleed. So she wrote her name in red and said, "Remember me." When she finished, I asked, "Did you write that?" She nodded. I smiled. "You just lit a match." In June, I published a third book. Not memoir, not guide. Poetry. Matchsticks. Words for women who refuse to stay burned. The cover featured a simple match. Struck. Lit. Glowing. Readers called it raw, unforgiving, necessary. Reviewers called it a war cry dressed as art. And one woman wrote to me, "I read one line and left him. Just one. That's all it took." That line? He called you crazy, but you never burned the house down. You just built one he couldn't enter. By summer's end, the Institute had outgrown its original footprint. We bought the adjacent land, built 3 new cabins, planned a second location. We started an annual anthology, The Marrow Pages, filled with writings from women who once whispered and now roared. We created a traveling exhibit, Echoes Reclaimed, and we added one final plaque beneath the main gate, founded by the woman they tried to erase. Years ago, I came home from my mother's funeral to find another woman in my house. Today, I come home to women who found themselves again. To walls built on truth. To doors that lock only for safety, never for silence. To rooms where voices grow louder, not smaller. To a life I built not in spite of the betrayal, but because of it. Because sometimes, survival isn't just walking away. It's staying. And building something no one can steal. So if you're listening now, if you've found this story and you're wondering if you're crazy, if the little cuts are real, if the ghost in your house wears perfume and smiles while she erases you, know this. You are not crazy. You are not small. You are not broken. You are the author. And this is just your first chapter. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.